right. Hi, everybody. Kevin Harned with you. Ryan Hoke is here as well. This is the Wave 3 News Storm Tracking Team Hangout. Brian Good may jump in and join us. Justin Logan is in bed. Tawana's in bed as well. They are on call for tomorrow morning. And we've got our whole team assembled ready for this winter storm. It's not going to be some huge winter storm, at least not for everybody. We're right on that dividing line. And we'll go through the latest data with you. We'll give you our latest forecast of what to expect here. And more importantly, we're just going to have some fun over the next 20 minutes or so talking about the weather and what's happening. We've been watching St. Louis all evening long. And Ryan, it has been fun to see the snow mount up out there. And frankly, travel's tough. Their roads are snow covered.
we've seen some of the Google traffic maps this evening, Kevin. They're just covered in red. You know those traffic maps you get on your phone, much like in the Wave 3 News weather app.
Yeah.
And in fact, I will show you right this second what it looks like out in St. Louis. Look at that. That is an incredible amount of snow on the roads out there.
I love the fact that the lane of traffic coming toward the camera, they're like right in the middle. That's really like 2 or 3 lanes there. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to hang right here.
It's incredible.
You can't tell where the lanes are. Well, they've already got several inches of snow. We point out St. Louis because they really are in the heart of this storm. They're going to wind up seeing, a foot of snow probably around St. Louis, more than a half a foot up around Indianapolis. So that's the zone that really is going to take the brunt of this storm. So it begs to, ask the question, well, what about here in Louisville? And, the number one question we get is always how much. So let me show you our forecast, the snowfall map of what we anticipate that snowfall to mount up to here in Louisville. 2 to 4 inches along the Ohio River is what we anticipate. Now, areas north will see more. And this is the latest thinking as we made our snow forecast this afternoon. It hadn't changed a whole lot since yesterday when we were on here talking about it. That 6 to 8 inch total still to our north could clip northern parts of the viewing area. All of that will be dependent on if it stays snow all day long or if there's a break or even transitions to a little rain. That's what keeps the snow totals lower to our south. There will be a break and there will be the transition to rain. And that's important to note because it's going to be bouncing back and forth through the day and especially early on and then again later in the day tomorrow. Really 2 decent waves of precipitation moving in. One comes in early tomorrow. That falls as snow. That gives us the accumulation. And then another one will move in later in the evening hours. And I know, Ryan, we'll talk about that over the next few minutes here and kind of chart that out and map that out. But that's the general snowfall forecast right there for folks saying, hey, I want to get out and, build a snowman. Play in the snow. Go sledding.
Do you want to build a snowman, Kevin?
Sing the song, will you?
Do you want to build a snowman?
Okay, on second thought, don't sing the song.
All the glass just shattered in here. I can't imagine why.
Pop out my earpiece. Wowza. All right. So anyway, that's what we're looking at. A number of folks always want to know, well, what is it going to be like in my backyard? There you saw the forecast snow map. We've got a lot we can talk about pushing forward, including when we see this transition. And a lot of folks will have questions and we will, we'll jump on and try to answer as many of those as we can. So many of those, maybe not as many if it were a school day, but so many of those is what's it going to be like in my backyard, specific places. And the fact is, just look at the map and, we've given you the range there. And that's oftentimes the best way to look at that.
And with these snowfall maps, Kevin, it's important to note that things change. There can be some dry air that tries to eat at this. There can be, banding that happens in southern Indiana that creates just a little bit more snow than we would see otherwise. This is just what you will likely see, but there are always going to be small exceptions to the rule there. And that's where your reports come in handy overnight tonight. We want you to be a two-way street with us. Tell us what you're seeing. Email us, Facebook us. We're on Twitter at Ryan Hoke Wave 3, at Kevin Harned. We're also on the Wave 3 Weather Facebook page that you're likely watching this very video on. So your eyes and ears overnight tonight will be crucial.
We've already heard from several folks saying we've got snow falling over in Cloverport. There's snow falling up around Jasper, Indiana. So those are helpful. That tells us that the atmosphere is saturated in those areas and the snowfall will begin moving in our direction accordingly. So there's nothing better. We say this in severe weather. We'll say it even more importantly in winter weather. Nothing better than the ground truth. We can have the most powerful radars on the planet, but there's nothing like a set of eyes really watching and observing what's happening. So to know that we're already starting to see the snow fall in the western part of the viewing area is important. Let me show you the radar, and I'll just mention that snow will continue working its way to the east. Now, it's going to look like it's snowing in E-Town. That, in fact, is not reaching the ground just yet. However, the snow across parts of Breckenridge and Grayson counties, as well as up around Jasper and I would venture to say even parts of Orange County up near Paoli, we are seeing it reach the ground. So that will be working its way eastbound. That's the snowmaker for the overnight. That's the accumulating snow that we will see into tomorrow morning. Notice how big this system is, spreading rain across parts of Oklahoma into southwest quadrant of Missouri, and then St. Louis is just in the prime spot to see some of that heavy snow. And if you extrapolate that to the east, that's where we're going to have the heaviest snow. Those areas are likewise under winter storm warnings. We are not under a warning.
That's right, Kevin. We're under a winter weather advisory, and that is very important to note because we don't have enough snow in the forecast to get to that warning status. It's 4 or more inches of snow to get there, and a lot of folks are saying, well, why are you calling it a winter storm? Well, we service 29 counties. 10 of those are in southern Indiana. Those counties in southern Indiana under a winter storm warning include areas from Seymour to Paoli to Madison. Speaking of Paoli, Kevin, they opened today. Paoli Peaks did.
Yeah, well, the tubing did, and the ski slopes and the snowboarding will open tomorrow. Some folks just jumping on want to see the snow map again, so let's show that. And I'll just point out that looking at the forecast totals, this is what we expect. Now, the bulk of this will fall for Louisville and Point South overnight tonight into early tomorrow, beginning around midnight and continuing through around 7, 8 a.m. Now, parts of southern Indiana may see snow continue tomorrow morning and even at times again tomorrow late afternoon and evening. And that's why the accumulation there is so much higher, on the order of 6 to 8 inches around Indianapolis, maybe as close to us as northern Jackson County.
And that's why that map says through Sunday, because of that northern extent, seeing more snow over a greater period of time. For here in Louisville, it's basically Saturday morning or bust for us, Kevin, because we'll see temperatures either at or above freezing for the rest of this deal Saturday afternoon and even into Sunday morning. Our temperature here, our forecast temperature is 33 degrees. So any additional rain or snow that we would see moving in would not really be sticking to the ground here in Louisville. Now in southern Indiana, there is that limited potential for some slight light accumulation Sunday morning.
And that's, a lot of folks saying, well, what about driving? I got, kids going back to college. I'm trying to make plans. We've got a doctor's appointment here. We're looking to get out here. We do have some travel information to share with you on when we think the roads may be most impacted. So here's the look at that. And you can see that there's only one time period that we've shaded in red, and that means it's going to be hazardous, and that is Saturday morning. Temperatures are below freezing. We have the snow that's falling overnight. We will see some slick roads, especially those that are untreated early Saturday. Now, rapid improvement happens Louisville south as temperatures rise above freezing Saturday afternoon and into the evening. That gives us some slushy, wet conditions on the roads. Even Saturday night, temperatures may not fall below freezing here in Louisville. So Sunday, for instance, we'll see some precip. It will be much lighter, maybe mixed with snow at times, but it's to our north that we would have the greatest concern. If we get a snowpack there of 4 or 5 inches of snow, northerly winds, that's going to create colder temperatures, and we could see a few slick spots. So we can't turn it to a green on the stoplight, but we'll keep it yellow. And then we'll be watching Monday morning as well for the potential for some light freezing drizzle. That'll be the coldest part of the near-term forecast as we do drop back into the 20s. So melting snow, anything falling would pose a few problems perhaps early Monday morning. That's all something we'll be watching.
These are the 3 impact times here that you're about to see on your screen that we're most concerned about, sort of in a more concise form. There's that Saturday morning deal here. That's tomorrow morning, just in a few hours. Moderate to heavy snow in places. Untreated roads will be covered with snow. Now, I've been seeing lines of brine on interstate, side roads, all sorts of roads today. That's going to be great because there's no rain coming before all of this moves in. There will be a little bit of sleet, but that brine will be very effective, especially because temperatures tonight will only get down to 28 degrees at the lowest, about 30, 31 here in the city. Then there's that Saturday night, Sunday morning deal for southern Indiana only. Here in Louisville, we're mainly above 32, and then we're still watching Sunday night into Monday morning for a spot or two that could see some freezing drizzle. We will evaluate that over the weekend further. At this point, it doesn't look like a huge deal, Kev.
Yeah, again, those 3 major impact times with Saturday morning affecting the most people, that's really something to keep an eye on. So let me show you how this plays out. We've got the Futurecast, and I'll just mention looking at when we see the snow move in. We're already seeing it out to our west. Everything is pretty much on track. Our temperatures right now in the city at 35 degrees. We'll see that go down, if not at freezing, below freezing around or just after midnight. It should be snowing here. I would say by 11 o'clock when I'm standing out in that weather garden, I think we'll see a few flakes of snow or sleet fall. And then after midnight is when we'll see the greatest accumulation of that snowfall. That continues through about 7 o'clock in the morning, maybe even 8 o'clock. And then notice the dividing line to our south. And notice the temperatures just about everywhere above freezing by mid to late morning. That's really going to help road conditions across the area. It's going to take some time, but that will help. And then the rain will certainly help. That will diminish snow totals across parts of central Kentucky and along the river, but we hold on to the snow falling in parts of southern Indiana, places like Seymour, Paoli, Salem, Scottsburg, Madison, North Vernon. You may see snow for a good chunk of the morning, a brief lull, and then watch what happens in the evening. More rain, precipitation lifts up. But as the sun sets, as we get into that 8, 9, 10 o'clock time frame, colder temperatures roll back into the north, and that again will give a renewed snow chance to those places that I just mentioned. And for that reason, the snow totals are higher there. 5, 6 inches of snow in some places. You work your way farther to the north near Indianapolis, and that's where we're talking 7, 8 inches of snow. That takes us on into the early morning hours on Sunday. So that's one way to look at it, is through the maps. Another way I like to look at it, and we always try to show this because I think this makes more sense to me than anything, is when's the highest precipitation chance and what type it's going to be.
And that's going to be on Saturday morning at 4 a.m., that 100% chance of snow. That's the highest chance of precipitation we have through this entire deal. Then during the afternoon, you see those 2 green columns there between 1 and 4 p.m. That is rain shower activity, but it's at 30% just because we'll have a dry slot of air try to move in during that time. More precip moves in at night. That's going to be a rain-snow mix. More so snow in southern Indiana closer to Seymour, more so a rain-snow mix in southern Indiana closer to the Ohio River, and maybe just some plain rain showers, Louisville south from that point, as temperatures, Kev, will still be above freezing.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit. I want to answer some of your questions. Some folks, Joey's saying he's on his break, southern Indiana over at Horseshoe. Done at 10:30. How's it look then? Again, we may see a few flakes of snow falling by then. Road temperatures are above freezing. Our actual air temperature likely still above freezing at that time. Don't see any problems here until well after midnight. Some folks, I know John Bowl was just tweeting. He was downtown at a restaurant, says, hey, it's 7 o'clock, prime eating time here, and no one is here. And he was saying that the restaurant managers were saying so many people canceled their reservations because of the weather. And I almost pulled the rest of my hair out.
You don't have much left there, Kev.
Both of them.
It is interesting, though.
It's crazy.
How people react to just us saying snow, and they think immediately that the problems start now. But they really don't start till after midnight here in the city. There are several dry hours left. You know, we were on a conference call today with the National Weather Service here in Louisville. Those great folks over there have been communicating with emergency managers and the media pretty much all day long. And they were telling us that if you have a school activity or something scheduled this evening, you're in great shape. Just make sure those buses and the kids are all home by about midnight or so, and everything will be just fine. And that is pretty much what we've been operating on here for the last several days. And, you know, that's what's coming to fruition right now.
We are getting some information in even as we speak here. They've pushed the winter weather advisory to begin an hour earlier. So instead of 10 o'clock, which was its original set time, is going to now begin at 9 o'clock. So that's just because we're already starting to see some of that snow fall back out to our west. And, you know, that's sort of splitting hairs there. It's not going to affect us in Louisville at that time, but places of Breckenridge, Grayson, and then across the river over into parts of Crawford counties, Du Bois County will be impacted a little earlier. So, again, just showing that the National Weather Service is watching the radar as well as us, and they're the ones in charge of issuing the advisories and the watches and the warnings.
Yeah, that's not a major change because no counties were added to that. Just checked on that to make sure everything matched up there. So far, everything is unfolding about the way we thought it would. The dry air was eating at a lot of the snow that we were seeing on the radar out to our west. Now we're seeing the snow starting to make it to the ground areas out near like Jasper, down toward parts of Breckenridge County, out near Cloverport. We've been getting a few of those reports in, and, you know, we're going to be watching that all night long, Kevin. It's always kind of a party around here when it's all this.
I'll tell you where it's a party is at Kim's house. She said she doesn't necessarily have milk and bread, but she's got beer and steaks. So, hey, you were at the grocery earlier today. I saw your.
Was.
Facebook post.
Wasn't buying beer and steak,
freaking everybody out. You just did it to see the reaction, didn't you?
There were only 3 people in there. I was shocked. It was empty. The
Really?
grocery store was empty this morning.
I have a buddy that's a pharmacist at a local Kroger store, and he was like, "It's nuts. It's a madhouse in here." So he was blaming it on us, of course.
Everybody thinks we're in cahoots with the grocery store companies. I promise you we're not. We pay probably more than you guys do.
Let's see here. I wanted to answer some of the questions. Why does Virga, warm air advection, and dry slots have to get in the way? Justin's mentioning that. And Justin, you're right. That's a snowstorm killer. For those people that love snow, first of all, let me explain what the 3 things are that I just mentioned. Virga is precipitation that's falling that's not reaching the ground. That happens when the atmosphere is dry and it's not saturated. So we're seeing that. When you look at the radar, you say, well, it should be snowing in E-Town, but it's not. So on radar, we'd call that Virga. It's because we have to saturate the lowest level of the atmosphere and have that precipitation reach the ground. The other one was the dry slot. That often happens. We get that dry air brought in around the cyclone, and we see that dry slot form, and that is a killer. And so many times around this part of the country, we see that, and it's going to happen again tomorrow. So it's the northern edge of the band that won't fade away. And that's why we have those higher totals, again, in support of southern Indiana, back out into parts of Illinois and Missouri. But for us, we should see some dry time in the afternoon tomorrow. And that dry slot oftentimes just completely shuts it down for us. So many times.
It does, and I've seen that like all through my childhood growing up here. It seems like we can't get one to go just right, but sometimes they do. And Jennifer Whitfield has a great question, good friend of the weather department here. She says, how confident are we in our predictions? It always seems that the river can change things. Not so much the river, but our confidence is actually pretty high on at least the first part of this.
Yeah, I think you're right. So many times people think because we live along the river, that's a determining factor. And they always, because we're in just that part of the country where it changes so much across the 29 counties that we serve. But the river really doesn't play a role in this, just like Floyd's Knobs doesn't play a role in what's going to happen. This is such a larger system, as all weather systems are, that the microscale climates play only microscale issues. So if we were looking at cold air damming up against the knobs and talking about a freezing rain scenario only in that area, that would be something to talk about. But the river does not control something that's so large and so powerful like a cyclone that we're dealing with here. And it never has, it never does, and it never will, but it often seems like it can because we see that dividing line across our area so often.
The only time I can think of a micro scale phenomenon here in Louisville affecting a snow amount so heavily was when I was in high school and I was living in southeast Jefferson County out in the hills and valleys near Route Road. You folks near like Taylorsville Lake Road, you know what I'm talking about. We got like 3 inches of snow out there. And as you took my school bus all the way down to Manual High School, there was almost no snow on the ground in the city. And the reason for that was the urban heat island effect. It stayed at 33 degrees all night long in downtown Louisville. The snow did not stick, but in the suburbs from St. Matthews down to southeast and even southwest Jefferson County, several inches of snow fell and stuck to the ground. And that's really the only time I can ever remember something that small really impacting us that big. And I don't think that'll be that big of a driver this time around.
Yeah, the heat island effect is something we see often, and that's why we often say, oh, the dreaded donut.
Yes.
So it's when that precip sort of surrounds us, and here in the city it doesn't. Let's see. Salem, the Walmart there, madhouse. That's according to Noah. I don't doubt it. People just freak out.
We should just go to a grocery store and just stand by the bread and milk sections and see what happens. I'd love to do that.
Hilarious.
Yeah, it would be.
Let's see. I'm looking for some of the questions that we have coming in. How much snow for certain areas? Again, the snow map shows that we have 2 to 4 right along the Ohio River, higher totals north of that, lower totals to the south. It begins here in Louisville around or just before midnight and then continues really overnight. So our greatest chance to accumulate snow would be between about that 2 to 7 a.m. time frame in the early morning hours. And areas to our south will start to see some of that warmer air work its way in, probably by mid to late morning, and then here in Louisville around midday.
One little wild card here, Kevin, about this whole thing is going to be later on Sunday. How do we get out of this? How does this whole system shut down and move out of here? A lot of the data is saying right now that it gets out of here by the afternoon. So our highest rain and snow chance on Sunday would be in the morning. And then by the afternoon on Sunday, we fade it down to like 30%, and we only keep like a 20% chance in overnight. As this thing unfolds, we'll be able to get more data in on how that's going to evolve on Sunday. But right now, that is our best forecast, and that's, at least medium confidence at this point on that.
And with that, temperatures likely Sunday morning, at least here in Louisville, will be around or just above freezing, so few, if any, issues on the roads. However, just to our north, if we get 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground, that will obviously impact your temperatures there, and you could very well be in the upper 20s, low 30s, and get more snow. So that's something we'll just have to watch early Sunday. But that dividing line of where we have the most snow on the ground and where that's chiseled away because of the rain on Saturday will be a determining factor of what happens on Sunday. So there are still lots of unknowns about the latter part of the weekend and even into Monday for that matter.
Ryan Burke has a good question. Will we see road conditions here in Louisville like they saw in St. Louis earlier tonight and ongoing? The answer is no, and here's why. One, we're not getting as much snow, not nearly as much snow. Louisville's getting 2 to 4 inches. Folks in St. Louis, 10 to 16 inches in that area. Huge difference in the temperature. They were at 28 degrees when the heaviest snow band was moving through this evening. It's a lot harder to get roads cleared and treated when it's 28 degrees as opposed to 30, 31 degrees. Third, a lot of the road crews here in Wave Country have been oh so busy brining the roads. There is no rain to begin this system. This starts as sleet and snow purely, so it won't wash off the roads. It will be effective. And road temperatures, I just checked them within the last hour, are between 38 and 45 degrees. It'll take some time for those road temperatures to go down. So the roads initially will be fine. They'll just be wet. And then those side roads and untreated roads will become hazardous at times tomorrow morning, but only for a short time. If you have afternoon plans here in Louisville all the way up to about, say, Scottsburg, Indiana, you should be in pretty decent shape. It's just going to be a wet road that you witness. If you're up in Seymour, maybe a little bit more troublesome through the early afternoon, and then you start to see some improvement by just before dinner time or so, if the temperature profiles play out the way that we're seeing them right now. So the short answer to that question, Ryan, is no, nothing like St. Louis here in Louisville. If we were going to have what St. Louis had, this would be a much bigger deal. You'd be hearing about winter storm warnings and a lot more about preparedness for some sort of bigger event. That's just not in the cards for us, and that is such a blessing because it's the weekend. Folks want to be out and about, and a lot of folks will not be impacted by this severely.
I want to punch up our SkyTrack camera. We mentioned just a minute ago that the word came in from the Weather Service that they were pushing forward the winter weather advisory by an hour. And there is a narrow band of snow falling across parts of Hardin County. It's just now starting to reach the ground there. And you can see on the top of this car, this is at the hospital there where we have our camera. We do have some snow reaching the ground. And because it's starting a little earlier there in that very narrow band, they've gone ahead and pushed that advisory up 1 hour. Show you the radar to match that, just to point out that we do have some snow falling across parts of Hancock, Breckenridge, and now into Hardin County, and it's sort of denoted by that bluer color, the brighter color showing up on the radar. Here in Louisville, nothing, but it's that little band that we'll be watching. So you are seeing some snow out of that. Wouldn't be surprised to see a slick spot or two, but in general, temperatures are still above freezing in that zone, and we're starting to see that precipitation saturate the atmosphere. And that's always a key, is when that's going to happen. And that's what it looks like when you kind of look at the precipitation falling. A little bit of sleet mixed in that too, I would assume.
Yeah, so those temperatures down there right at freezing from Hardinsburg to E-Town. Litchfield still at 34. Louisville at 35 degrees. Look what's happening up to our north. That's Salem at 31. That's Paoli at 32 degrees. Seymour is at 30. You kind of get the trend here. Areas in Kentucky a little bit warmer than southern Indiana as expected. But as the heavier precipitation moves in, especially that band we showed you from Hardinsburg to E-Town here, what's going to happen is called evaporative cooling. That evaporative cooling takes those temperatures down just a few degrees, because as the air saturates and as we start to see the evaporation occur through the column of the atmosphere, that begins to take some of the heat from the air. It's what we call an endothermic process. You remember that one from high school or college?
Oh my gosh!
It takes
you just brought the nerd out and everybody right there.
Nerd alert! That's why we went
endo and exothermic, by the way.
Yes, those are the two terms. So, yeah, we'll see that happen here in Louisville, Kev, as this moves in. Temperatures getting down to the freezing mark, and our low tonight is 30 here in the city. I think we'll be pretty close on that, within a degree or two, based on some of the latest trends here in the data.
I thought Dan had a good question. At least it went by so fast. I think it was Dan. He was saying, what about those temperatures? Because they will play such a critical role. Today was running about 3 degrees below what the models projected, what we were projecting. We thought we might hit 40. We hit 37. That does matter. And if tomorrow, depending on where the heaviest snow falls, and the snowpack will play a role too in how much we warm during the day tomorrow. So, I mean, it's all based on that advection of the area of low pressure and exactly where that goes. I mean, this is why we say the track of the low matters. I mean, 10, 20 miles makes a big difference in something like this, especially when you're talking snowpack on the ground and trying to overcome those temperatures, because that's tough to do. So we'll have to see, the track of the low, which we feel like we have a pretty good handle on moving across Tennessee. And secondly, how much cold air advection we would have coming in from the north, or the warm air advection. So it's a battle of the two air masses at that point, whether it's falling as rain, snow, or a mix during the day tomorrow. And that dividing line will be crucial for the following forecast through the balance of the weekend.
Dan Barnes has a question. He says the models ran a little warm on high temperatures today. He was talking about 3 to 4 degrees there, and that's true.
Were you just listening? That was the question I just read.
Was that the question you just read? You're kidding.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh. See, I'm trying to run all these computers and graphics and switchers over here, and I'm like, I'm sure I was listening to Kevin.
Oh, and we're back. Anyway, do you want to answer him again?
I don't know if I want to answer it now, Kevin.
Sorry.
I had it for you. Just for you. Thank you, Kevin. Just for you, I will re-answer your question here. Okay, so yes, temperatures only got to 37 degrees in Louisville today. We had forecast 40. Reason for that is we had some cloud cover today, a little bit of insulation there in the atmosphere trying to keep us a little cool. So that begs the question, well, what about tomorrow? Will we be cooler than what we had forecast and what the model said? The answer is not as easy as today, and the reason for that is we're switching out air masses, we're moistening up, we've got more humidity moving in, so that rule kind of gets thrown out. What I will say is that the RPM and the high-res rapid refresh model, those are two of those little fine scale, what we call mesoscale models. They have super high resolution. We use them a lot on TV. Those two models have been running about 2 to 3 degrees too warm for their initialization temperature. So the first temperature they spit out, they're saying this right now, it's supposed to be 33 degrees. Well, they've been wrong. It's about 35 degrees right now here in Louisville. So we'll have to see how that impacts things down the road overnight. What it will do at a minimum is keep our pavement temperatures at an elevated level, refrigerated level instead of frozen level, for a little bit longer. So that may help out the roads a little bit, at least initially. We'll see how that pans out. Dry air always has to be overcome in this situation, and it looks like we're doing that pretty efficiently to our south and west.
Yeah, that's for sure. Already seeing the snow, especially in that banding down to the south and west. So we would anticipate that it's not going to take much to see some of that snow, and becoming a little more confident that by 11 o'clock, even here in Louisville, a few flurries or sleet pellets would be reaching the ground and then really starting to pick up overnight. It's going to take a little bit of time to accumulate, 2 inches of snow, even 3 inches of snow. But we should do that between that midnight time frame and that 8 a.m. time frame. So that's the plan. Tonight at 11, by the way, we've got crews working on, obviously, snow coverage and the crews that will be out for the plows. So Taylor Durden is out in the Storm Tracker, and Caitlin will be working to see how many folks are going to keep the streets safe early tomorrow. It's a Saturday, so that's good news. You don't have to worry about the school buses being out.
That's such a huge factor, is this being a weekend. There's no morning commute for 90% of us, and there's just not going to be as many kids, or I should say as many buses on the road, both TARC buses and school buses, obviously, because it's not a school day either. So that will help traffic in the morning not be a huge deal. So you can just stay at home, watch the snowfall, and if you want to do some sledding in the morning, Kevin, the morning is the best time to do it. The afternoon here in Louisville, might just be slush, kind of a nasty above freezing sort of wet snow and slush scenario here. Seymour will have a little bit more time to do some sledding tomorrow.
Speaking of that, I asked yesterday, I said, hey, how are we going to explain? Because that's the thing. Kids get excited about the snow. Parents are like, oh my gosh, all the kids are going to be in the house now. What are we going to do? Right. So it's like, when are they going to get outside to sled? So we came up with the sledding forecast and the best time to do that. So let's show that. And we'll point out that southern Indiana, places where we expect that 3, 4, 5 inches of snow, places like Paoli, Salem, Seymour, North Vernon, Scottsburg, Madison, Paris Crossing. Yes, most of the day Saturday could be decent for snow. This snow is going to be a heavy, wet snow. We call that a heart attack snow because it's so heavy, tough to shovel. So keep that in mind. But it is going to be a good snowball making snow, decent for sledding, especially to our north. Now, along the river, if you're looking to get out and play in the snow, you're going to want to do it early before we see any transition to rain and before those temperatures rise into the upper 30s. That's places like Brandenburg, Corydon, Louisville, Shepherdsville, over to Taylorsville, moving through parts of Spencer and Shelby counties, and then areas to our south. I'm afraid you won't have a really good chance to sled. The totals are going to be so light, and it's going to warm up faster there, and consequently see a little more rain there early. So maybe really early in the day, you might get a, inch, 2 inches of snow in some of those locations, lesser totals as you go farther to the south. But the greatest potential for that sledding, snowman making snow is off to our north. And there again is our snow map.
Yeah, wanted to make sure we show that early and often here. Lots of folks asking for that. Once again, that is also available on our Wave 3 News weather app. It's available here on our Facebook page if you scroll down. And this entire Wave 3 News Storm Tracking Team Hangout will be available on the Wave 3 News weather blog somewhere near the 10 o'clock hour this evening. If you'd like to review it and watch it again, maybe show it to your family and friends, send it as a link. That can always be a good option.
All right, so there's the answer to how much we'll get and when. Sleeting hard in Radcliffe, so that's that band we were talking about on the radar, and we can show you that radar as well. It is in that band where we do have some sleet that will not take long to be overtaken by snow, though. So expect that if you're seeing the sleet in Radcliffe now, you'd have about 15, 20 minutes of that before we transition to a period of just light snow, and that will happen through the rest of the overnight there. So really, once it starts snowing, there's no letting up on that until the very early to mid-morning hours tomorrow.
Leah says it's heart attack snowing in E-Town right now. Sounds pretty heavy to me.
Yeah, we can actually see that falling. And, one measurement we watch are the parking lots as those become snow covered. Hasn't happened yet because the ground temperature is still somewhat warm, but there's that car we're looking at, and you can see that is getting more of a coating of snow on the top of it.
We're on car watch tonight, Kevin.
Yeah, who knew we'd be sitting here mesmerized, just waiting. When we say we, Jessica, we're talking about the entire area, and then we pinpoint those different locations. Higher totals, oftentimes if I'm saying we, meaning here in the city, our greatest population is here, but we obviously serve 29 counties, so we talk about everybody. But if I'm saying we in particular, it would be here for Louisville.
Cecilia, Kentucky. Dale says his truck already has snow on it. Sounds about right down there.
Just going back and seeing, Andrea is asking about Brian and his Twix because he loves Twix and somehow equates that to snow in the Twix index. And to be honest, I talked with Brian a number of times today, and he never told me how many Twix.
He didn't tell you. Well, it's a good thing that we've got the Twix index graphic ready to go, since I'm the graphics guru around here.
Yeah.
And he has put it
at a 5.
He's got it at a 5 right now. That is the Twix index at the moment.
I don't even know what that means. So
it means he's hungry.
It means he probably needs to go on a diet.
Brian, if you're watching, HR, their phone number is just...
He's not watching, or he would be on here. I know. He was having a crisis this afternoon, so I'm certain he's taking care of that. All right.
Everything's fine, by the way.
Well, we hope.
Yes.
36 in Munfordville. Again, Jessica, thanks for the report. Those temperatures are so helpful. Especially on the onset of this precipitation, because once we drop below freezing, that's really when we're going to start to see the problems take place. Again, our guess is that won't really impact us in Louisville until well after midnight, or at least after midnight. And once that we get below that 32-degree mark, and in particular near 30 or upper 20s, that's when we're going to start to see the accumulation take place on the roads. That's when things will become a little more dangerous across the area, so to speak. So decent timing on that. If we had to pick a time, it would be an overnight into early Saturday. Some folks working, some people asking, how's this affect UPS? And really, they're so used to this. It doesn't affect air travel at all. They'll de-ice the planes. They'll do what they have to do. And as far as the people that have to work out in it, that'll be the biggest inconvenience.
1994, Kevin, was a pivotal year for how this city reacts to a snow situation that's much worse than this one. Since 94, the airport has improved dramatically. Different things in the metro government have changed to make sure that there's more preparedness. It's a different world. So when you get 2 to 4 inches of snow here in 2019, it's not that huge a deal. You just have to make sure you're taking it slow, watching the terrain in front of you as you're driving. And, of course, hats off to the crews who've been brining for the last over 24 hours now. It's been about 36 hours since they started brining here in the city of Louisville.
So many people chiming in with their temperatures. Paoli at 32, Pendleton 32, 31 in Madison. So, yeah, those are the critical temperatures, and they'll only go lower tonight. Many areas outside of the city will be in the upper 20s, low 30s, and even here in Louisville, we're taking our forecast low down to 30 degrees, and that's when we'll start to see that accumulation around the area. 36 in Upton, and likewise, you can still see sleet and snow with temperature at the surface, by the way, above freezing. It just melts once it reaches the ground there, Kathleen. So wouldn't be surprised in Upton to see a little bit of sleet fall within the next few minutes or so, and that transitions to snow overnight for you folks before back to a cold rain tomorrow morning.
Oh, our favorite, Debbie Ballard. I've known you for years here on Facebook, since my Ryan Weather days. That's a long time ago. She's asking, do you anticipate any of this rogue heavy banding scenario to get going? And there is a chance for that isolated banding, especially in southern Indiana early tomorrow morning, as this thing starts to really pivot east and you start to get on the deformation side of this whole deal here. So yes, there could be some rogue banding. It's not going to be a huge player. Most of the heavy snow is going to be in central Indiana. If you're going to pick a place in Indiana where you get the most snow, it'd probably be pretty close to Indianapolis. The big winners, of course, out in St. Louis, 10+ inches of snow. Some of that data up to 16 inches out that way. And we've seen some rogue 18, 19 amounts in some of the forecast data as well out there. So huge storm for them. Kind of a nuisance for us that doesn't last all too long, at least here in the city of Louisville.
The awesome part about it not lasting long is that the rain is going to help out, both with the snow totals and also the road conditions. So that's what we are watching. And we're getting some new data in. The 0Z NAM is coming in. And for the weather geeks out there, you know what I'm talking about. That's the evening run of the North American model. And it really still is holding on to the fact that we transitioned to rain as early as, 8 a.m. here in Louisville. So we'll start to see that mix, see a little bit of a dry slot work in, and then back to a cold rain through the afternoon, that 3, 4, 5 o'clock time period, with snow on the northern edge of this, taking it across parts of central Indiana. Again, may be as far south as Seymour, but more likely up around Indianapolis, arcing back across Illinois and into Missouri, where it snows not only tonight, but all day tomorrow.
Temperatures on that latest NAM model run here go all the way up to 35 tomorrow in Seymour. Here in Louisville, it hits our forecast high of 38. And that's going to be around the 5, 6 o'clock hour there as this warm air advection really gets going. And then during the overnight hours, it takes us down to 33 degrees at the lowest on Sunday morning, which is also our forecast low. So that looks to be a pretty decent run of the NAM there for those weather geeks out there who are going to be looking at that here over the next several minutes.
Just gotten some information in from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. They obviously are watching the roads and the weather closely. This is out of District 2, so folks off to our south and east. Henderson County reporting sleet causing a few slick spots. Maintenance crews, they've got 7 trucks on the roads there spreading salt. Just over in Hancock County, that was that narrow band of snow we were talking about. They also have snow starting to accumulate. They have 5 salt trucks out there. Other counties have supervisors out checking those roads and conditions. And in District 1, Crittenden County, it's just outside side of our viewing area. They've got 1 inch of snow on grassy areas and the pavement turning white. Marshall County likewise responding to some slushy conditions. So that's what's happening across parts of western Kentucky, at least just west of our viewing area. That's what's moving in our direction. So that's why it's important to note that.
Still looking at some of this forecast data here coming in, and the snowfall totals on the newest NAM model also align pretty closely with our forecast here. It's interesting because it does shift some of the heaviest in central Indiana, a little farther north, Indianapolis, north of there. But here locally, pretty close to what we have, at least here in the city of Louisville. That 2 to 4 inch total looks solid.
Now, let's put up the road pavement temperatures, and I'll just mention that many areas around the region still have the pavement warmer than freezing, and it's going to take some time for that to come down, even once the air temperature drops below freezing. Now, we oftentimes see that the rate of the snowfall can affect that, and that's what will happen tonight. So you're looking at the temperatures on area pavement, and these are mostly interstates as soon as it loads. So bear with us because this is a very intense graphic that has a lot of data coming into it. So sorry to spring that on you there, Ryan, but thanks for loading it. So
there we go.
There you see the pavement temperatures out across parts of, as you move 34 degrees out I-64 over toward Du Bois County. That's showing near Birdseye. Pavement temperatures 34. Near the overpass there, it's 33, and the air temperature is 32. And that's the lowest temperature we have around the region. But I suspect that, you know, through the balance of the night, as we start to bring in the precipitation, these will slowly fall as well. But it will still take some time. So even along the Western Kentucky Parkway in Grayson County or down into Hardin County, even though we have some snow and sleet falling, the air temperature in the mid-30s, it will take some time to see the pavement temperature drop to a critical value. And in fact, may not in some places.
Yeah, especially in areas like Louisville, where we're going to have some of that pavement temperature warmth hanging around here for a little bit longer than most, because our temperature is still well above freezing here in the city. Bowman Field's at 36 degrees right now for an air temperature. And then once you go down south toward like Adair County, it's just going to be so warm so early that the impacts there on the roads will be relatively small throughout the morning and the afternoon of tomorrow.
Kathleen says, yes, down in Upton, we do have some sleet. And Tim out of Hodgenville saying we've got a little snow. Let's put the radar view up, and we'll just leave that up while we answer a few more questions here, because we do have that snow across parts of the viewing area. And again, for folks watching here in Louisville saying, well, when's it going to arrive here? It should be around, I'd say, somewhere between 11 and midnight. Okay, so we're still a little ways away. Pavement temperatures are above freezing. We should see no issues out of this until after midnight here in Louisville.
Yeah, because it's still dry in Louisville for now. Areas up toward Oldham County, Shelby County, Bardstown, still very dry. Pretty much next in line to see this heavier little band of snow move on in. That'll take your temperature down to around the freezing mark, as it has down in E-Town. And those elevated surfaces, those grassy areas, those untreated surfaces, they'll start to whiten up down that way. Treated roads should be just fine for the next several hours here.
Yeah, Dominic, thanks, saying he was over in Meade County, basketball game there, and there was some snow that started to fall. So we appreciate the reports there. E-Town playing over in Meade County tonight, I believe. So if you're out at some of the high school basketball games, be careful driving back, but the road should remain wet. Not a chance, Dale. Yeah, I made that mistake one time, and it got taped and put on YouTube and everywhere else. So
it's still there
on the ground. Yeah, yikes.
That was the most amazing thing you've ever done, Kevin.
I think both Belsky and I maybe, well, I don't know if regret's the right word, but we had fun doing it. We just made ourselves look like fools doing it.
They're going to put that thing in the Library of Congress. You know that,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Oh, my. All right. I'm jumping back into the questions here. Let's see if we have any. Donna, yeah. Well, Brian, yeah, good question. Brian may very well be asleep. A number of folks will be in tomorrow to make sure we roll through the weather just fine. Justin Logan will be in early in the morning. Our shows begin, well, certainly before sunrise tomorrow. So if you're up early on Saturday, tune in. They'll be here making sure they walk you through the the conditions that are around the area.
Alan Thompson says he's got nothing falling from the sky in Campbellsville just yet, which is interesting because you've got radar returns right over you. Some dry air being overcome down in Taylor County. I'm assuming in the next several minutes, if not within the hour, you're going to see some snow and sleet falling from the sky down there.
Yeah, and Kay is asking about Campbellsville too. So eventually it saturates there. Give it another 20 minutes or so, and you'll probably be seeing some of that sleet and light snow and very light accumulations of snow down toward Campbellsville. In fact, may see an inch, probably less than that, from Campbellsville on south. This is really a Indiana, Illinois, Missouri snowmaker as this system pushes off to the east. We'll zoom the radar out so you can see the bulk of that storm, and we're on the leading edge of it now. So we will see the precipitation fill in across our area overnight. That continues, and then back out to our west, St. Louis, through the southern half of Illinois, into parts of central Indiana. That's where we have the greatest concentration. We'll sort of annotate the map and show you where we have the area of low pressure and the track we expect it to take. And this is why the track is so important. Oftentimes we say, well, 50 miles on this track makes a big difference. Well, here's why. Because as that area of low pressure moves east, and by now we have a pretty good idea of where it's going to go. Yesterday, it was still a little uncertain, though our projection was correct. You can see it's going to move right across Tennessee, and the periphery of where that rain snow line sets up will be temperature dependent in so many cases, and it's going to just take that arc of heaviest snow right into central Indiana. Parts of southern Indiana get in on that as well, and that's why we have the 4 to 6 inch snow range in parts of our viewing area. But that is the sweet spot right there for the heaviest snowfall tonight, tomorrow, into tomorrow night.
Yeah, St. Louis getting absolutely hammered still with snow. I mean, their traffic issues are well known in the last several hours there, and it just keeps reforming that banding, even the little dry slot filling in just west of them, now moving into the St. Louis metro area. If you have travel plans tomorrow up north, like you've got a day trip planned to Indianapolis, that's going to be tricky, especially once you get north of about Scottsburg and Seymour. You're going to be running into some big old snow totals up there. That's going to be that 6 to 8 inch band, if not some locally higher totals, as you approach the I-70 corridor. So maybe you're heading over to Terre Haute, maybe you're heading over to Richmond, Indiana, maybe you're heading west into Illinois. That's where you're going to see those problems. If you're heading south tomorrow, if you got a day trip to Nashville, if you got a day trip to Bowling Green, should be fine, especially after 9, 10 o'clock if you're starting out somewhere close to Louisville. And then heading eastbound from Louisville, things will be pretty similar, a 2 to 4 inch band going pretty much along I-64, pretty close to, I should say, Lexington, if not north of there. Cincinnati travelers on 71 tomorrow, you'll deal with some heavier snowfall totals as you approach the northern Kentucky area, just northeast of Carroll County.
All right, little sleet down in Bowling Green, thanks to Michael Sills, meteorologist and a great friend of the team's here. We appreciate that report. Let's see. Elizabeth is asking, how do we calculate how much snow we could possibly get? Oh, that's a good question and a tough one to answer because there are so many factors that go into it. We use obviously the computer models that you've seen us show, and oftentimes they don't agree, so we then have to put our education to work and determine which of those we like the best, which has biases. We look at first the current conditions that we have going on. The dry air plays a role. How much of the precipitation will be sort of eaten up? I mean, it's like Pac-Man, right? If the snow moves in and the dry air is in place, it just sort of chomps it up until we get the atmosphere or that column saturated. So we look at the dry air. That's one thing. We look at how much moisture is in the atmosphere that has even the potential to fall. And then we have to know the temperature profile of the atmosphere because that helps us determine if it's a heavy wet snow, which really doesn't accumulate as much or as tall, if you will, as a lighter fluffy snow. And that matters by perception of people and how it affects people. A lighter fluffy snow can be easier to deal with in many instances than a heavy wet snow. So lots of components go into the forecast of how much, and it is extremely difficult. I think because the technology and frankly, what people have gotten used to out of the meteorologist, including our team, of being decent at doing it, it's become expected that we're going to nail it every time. And many times we do, but it is very complicated to come up with a precise and exact snow forecast. And that's why we give at least a range. I mean, we're not pinpointing down to the 10th of an inch what everybody's going to get, but getting it within an inch or two is a pretty good guess.
And easily one of the hardest things we do, because if we have just a small deviation in a rain forecast, let's say we called for half an inch of rain and you got what, 0.38 inches. Well, you wouldn't think anything of it. You go, oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty close. But with that same amount of moisture, you would go from 3.8 inches of snow to 5 inches of snow. That's something you're going to notice more. So it's way less forgiving, snow forecasting is, than rain forecasting.
Well, and people hold you to it, right? So, I mean, no one really cares if they got 1.2 inches of rain or 1.4, but if it's a snow forecast and you're looking at the end, that's the difference of a couple of, that's a sizable difference in snowfall. So people notice that. Dale is saying 1/2 inch of snow down in Cecilia on St. John's Road. I know exactly where that is. So I appreciate that report there, Dale. And let's see. We have sleet falling down in Bardstown now. And Derek pointing out that there's now the donut hole forming around us. And that'll take place until we become saturated here, Derek. So I suspect we'll see that fill in by 10, 11 o'clock and then start to see some of that snowfall here in the city between 11 and midnight.
Yeah, that heavy band from Brandenburg now down toward Bardstown. Leading edge is right on the south side of Bardstown in Nelson County. That's going to be a mix of sleet and snow. And as what we call wet bulb or evaporatively cool down to our temperature there near freezing, we'll see a little bit of that sleet, and it eventually just turns to a pretty moderate to, at sometimes, heavy snow. The heaviest of the snow, of course, going to be north of Louisville in parts of central Indiana, southern Indiana, seeing the most snow of our counties here in wave country. No snow here in Louisville yet, but we're getting pretty close to when we'll start seeing at least a few flakes around here.
Yeah, and the awesome part about these cameras that we have, and we have 10 of them strategically placed in our viewing area, and we can tap into hundreds more across the entire country. So that's how we've been showing you what's happening out in St. Louis. But here's Bardstown. You could see nothing accumulating on the ground, despite the fact in parts of the city we're starting to see at least some snow or sleet. And this will be changing too as that heavier band starts to work its way through. Temperatures, they're still above freezing. So again, no big problems expected until likely after the midnight hour.
A lot of folks asking about road conditions in various towns in the morning. I will say that in the morning, that will be about the worst time for travel in this entire event. Saturday morning, because that's when temperatures will be below freezing or at freezing in many places. We will have had or are still having the snow falling. So use caution in the morning. A lot of the roads are going to be treated. That's going to be extremely helpful. But even with those roads treated, there are going to be side roads and neighborhood roads and driveways you'll still have to be careful on. By the afternoon, we should be in pretty decent shape, though.
Some folks asking, can the path change now where Louisville would see more snow than expected? The only way we would see likely more snow than expected would be on that second batch in the afternoon or evening hours. If we can get strong enough advection coming in off of a snowpack to keep our temperature down. But at this point, the track of the low should win out on that. And with it going across Tennessee, there's nothing to support that we would go back to snow. We may go back to a mix, but at this point, nothing supports going back to a snow. But that would be the only change, is that the models don't have a handle on what is yet to come, meaning the snow that will fall overnight tonight. So that would be one thing we'll watch. And as you know, again, that's watching that temperature. That becomes nowcasting, and that's much more kind of tedious than just a glance at the models to say, hey, here's what the models say and here's what we're going to go with and here's our forecast. It then becomes, you're looking at distance in miles to say, well, here's where that line is going to set up. And at this point, it appears far enough south that Louisville would not necessarily be in a threat to see a whole lot more snow than 2 to 4 inches.
And we would also see some signs on the radar and in some of the short-term forecast data at about this thing we're about to go awry. And right now we're not seeing that. Everything's lining up pretty well. The only thing that we have seen as a trend in the last maybe several hours is just the speed of this. It's sped up just a touch, but it's just not enough to make a real difference, especially when you consider the temperatures are either at or just above freezing. Louisville at 35. We've got Bowman Field 36, Huntingburg, Indiana 30, Fort Knox at 34, Frankfort 33, and up in Columbus, Indiana, just north of Seymour, currently at 30. That's about what we expected here.
All right, kids, listen up. For all the kids online here, we've just received word from the city that the sledding hills to be opened following local snow events. So now here's the deal. Many thousands will want to hit the slopes. So here's the criteria of when those hills will open. They will open the 7 parks for sledding between 9 a.m. and 11 p.m. on days when that snow accumulation reaches 2 to 3 inches. So that's the deal. We have to have the 2 to 3 inch snowfall, and then places like Cherokee Park, George Rogers Clark Park, McNeely Lake Park, Tyler Park, Charlie Vedner Park, those will all open at that point. This season, the sledding hills at Joe Creason Park across from the zoo are going to be closed. That park continues its restoration process. So that was after that cyclocross event that they had there in December. So that will not be open.
It's interesting, the criteria there, like 2 to 3 inches or higher. Our forecast is 2 to 4, so we're going to be right on the bottom edge of that. So really pay attention to those snowfall totals in the morning, and that'll dictate whether or not you can go to those parks and sled. I hope we get some sledding weather for kids.
Well, I do too. If it's going to happen on a Saturday, they may as well be able to enjoy it, right? I mean, if you're not going to get out of school for it, you might as well go sled.
Yeah, right? I mean, have some fun with it.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap things up here as we take a look at the radar and then jump back on and say our goodbyes. I just want to reach one more time and see if we have any final questions before we go. Some folks giving us a report snowing over in parts of, I'll just pass by it, Radcliffe. That's what I saw. And then down in Nelson County, we see that report.
And there's a final look at our snowfall map as well, because I know so many people are asking for this. We've got it on social media. More importantly, it's on the Wave 3 News weather app. Make sure you've got that on your phone so that you can download that and see all of our updated information overnight.
Yeah, and looking at some of the data that's coming in, I really don't see a whole lot of change that's going to take place in this map. We'll look through all of the data that we have over the next hour and a half here. We're back on Wave 3 News at 11 o'clock, so we'll have our final forecast then. And then Justin Logan is in bright and early for sunrise tomorrow morning. Stay tuned for the 11 o'clock broadcast tonight. We have our storm tracker out. They'll have real-time road conditions, and we'll be able to go through everything you need to know for the weekend. Remember those 3 critical times. The main one is Saturday morning with the snow falling and the potential for those slick spots. That's when we'll see the accumulating snow in Louisville. And then 2 other ones that we're watching, less concerned with here in Louisville, but something to keep in mind would be Sunday morning, late Saturday night, and then again early Monday morning. So we'll go through all that tonight on the newscast with you. So we appreciate everybody jumping on board here and always trusting the Wave 3 News Storm Tracking Team. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you back.